Welcome to the Player Same podcast. Let's talk about the game. The game is where players play. The game is where everybody competes for power, for pleasure, and ultimately to fulfill their purpose. The game and the rules of the game have been passed on from player to player over generations, and that's how most of us learn. A few of us figure it out on our own because it's built into our wiring. I don't want to trivialize what is happening here because the game is not child's play. I refer to it as a game because there's rules and people do compete to win. In Hindu philosophy, they refer to the game as the divine Lila, which literally means game. The game that we're all experiencing as life as a sort of a cosmic play that we're all basically stuck inside. Who created the game? Maybe it was the gods. Maybe it was the universe. Why are we playing this game? What's the point? A lot of us are tied into the game and we don't look at it as a game. We just look at it as straight survival. Some of us, and I don't like using the term, but lower animals, for example, just the other animals that are just instinct driven. They're competing for survival, competing for the same similar things, resources, and not so much pleasure, but reproduction. But they don't have this strange reality that we as humans have, where we are like little characters in a video game chasing coin. If you guys remember Mario Brothers, blip, 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 coin. The fact that power has been turned into coin or dollars turns the game into something you can actually quantify. And people chase it. In the game, you have players and you also have squares. Now, what is a square? A square is somebody who is in the game, but they don't realize they're in the game. They don't realize there are rules in the game. And so they actually just kind of go with the flow. These are what Friedrich Nietzsche would have called herd animals, right? Commonly nowadays, people refer to them as sheeple, which I don't like that word. I think squares are okay. Squares are good. Squares make up the majority of people around us. These are people who are tapped in. They're not rocking the boat. They are sustaining the structure of the world that we live in. These are people who are not overly ambitious. They just trying to support their families, support themselves. They're not really causing much harm overall, though there's different kinds of squares. But overall, their role, although I think they all could be players, but their role is just to learn what's in front of them. They're not really trying to tap out of that. So there's players, there's squares, and then you have haters. And haters are bad. Haters make people sad. Haters are unhappy, sad little souls who just can't seem to be satisfied. They're ungrateful. They may even have wealth. They may have money. They may have honey. And they're still looking at somebody else's plate to find out what that person has there. They could have their piece of chicken, but they still want to know, well, why does that guy have two pieces of chicken? This unhappy, unsatisfied, constant desire to look at what other people have. But ultimately, I think what happens with these haters is that they're just not happy. And so there's levels to haters as well. All of us could be guilty of a little bit of envy, looking at somebody else's plate and be like, ooh. The difference between a player looking at someone else's plate, they think, well, how can I get that too? Here's a big difference, okay? A player will see, what does that guy have, and get inspired. Like, how can I get that too? A good player will go, wow, hey, props on what you got there. That's a nice piece of chicken. You know, they give props. We congratulate. A hater will not want that person to have that piece of chicken. They prefer that person to just go hungry or go less. That's the big difference. And for me, in my assessment of reality, haters are just the worst thing on the planet because they just unnecessarily cause pain and suffering and unnecessary drama. Now, in the game, we have players, and there's a difference between good players and bad players. Essentially, we're all players to some degree, but Players either play by the rules of the game or they just go out and get it. And some players act like haters too. There's some major players out there that you're just like, why are you worried about some other player? Borderline bad players can be haters. And the difference between a good player and a bad player is that good players respect the rules. A bad player can still get the money, can still get the honey, can still achieve a certain level of power, but they're not concerned with the team. They're not concerned with the integrity of the game. They're out for their own bottom line, which it's no hate against any particular player. I think it's very normal to look out for yourself, especially those of us who grow up in environments, in the inner cities and whatnot. People are very cutthroat. And so we start feeling very cynical about humans and their intentions. Those of us who've grown up supposedly around homies or friends and find that the people who are quick to betray you are them. Those are the ones you have to worry about, your own family members. And so then at a certain point, you either become that same type of cutthroat scoundrel, or you try and idealize a reality where that doesn't happen. Well, for bad players, and I'm not trying to make excuses for anybody, but I feel that that's where it comes from. Bad players just figure it's like, I screw you before you screw me. And so a lot of people have that mentality. There's levels to this. There's a level of not being able to accomplish what you want. And then there's the other level where you accomplish what you want, but you still feel empty. Buddha used to define suffering as grasping or attaching yourself to things. And then he also defined, how do you break out of suffering, which is you learn to let go. And it seems like we're all either hustling for something, we want something, and then when we got it, we're bored with it. So where's the fulfillment for that, right? When I was a youngster, my biggest dream was, man, I want to play at the House of Blues one day. And then I played at the House of Blues. I wanted to play at the Whiskey where the Doors played. And I played at the Whiskey. And my life didn't change. There was no difference. I thought, well, one day I'll be on TV or one day I'll be on the radio. I accomplished these things. And I got there and I was like, well, where is it? It's almost like, if you ever seen those cartoons where there's a beautiful thing and as soon as you hug it, it just disappears. And so it's very important that we understand that illusion is there. A couple of weeks ago, I had the pleasure of speaking to Dr. Luciano Pulido, and I asked him this question, specifically about the game, but about reality. Is this a hologram? Is this an illusion? Is this a simulation? And I asked him that because I do believe this is a simulation of sorts. It's a form of illusion. Those of us who chase the appearance of things find ourselves grasping at nothing. And anybody that has felt success in the game at some point will feel, man, I wanted this thing. And now that I have it, why am I not fulfilled? The question was, are we in the matrix? Yeah, we're in the matrix. We absolutely are in the matrix. Dr. Pulido, what his answer was is that it's difficult to convey to people the idea that they're living in an illusion because the reality that we exist in appears so real. In the context of the game, how could you convince a player or a hater or whoever is living in this reality that, hey, what you're doing is not right? There's another game. There's an over game beyond this. When all they know is this. I was that type of player at some point, kind of atheistic. I only believed in the material world. I'm thinking that I'm just some kind of organic robot with a preset of instructions with my DNA, and that once I die, it turns off and boom, that's it. And so what do you do with that? Well, you just grasp at every moment of life that you can, and you try to get as much as you can of the pie. Try to maximize the number of good experiences versus the bad ones. I still agree with a lot of that. The difference is the idea of transcendence, right? If we really understood how infinite we are, that tends to change the code of how we view our lives. But I've come to believe that you can play the game in a good way. And when you do so, the game rewards you, because the game isn't just this material reality that we think is here. And so when we talk about the game in terms of players, good players and bad players, there's also what I've come to call a player saint. A player saint is tapped into their money and their honey. They're still out to get their power, their pleasure. But what makes them distinct is that they have honed in on a purpose. Not just a purpose in life, but their purpose across many lives. The ultimate purpose. And in that spirit of that player saint philosophy is why I'm here, is to try to share even just a little bit of game with some of the youngsters, people who are trying to figure out the game, or people who are squares and they're like, why am I not accomplishing what I want to accomplish? I am Santos de Los Angeles, and I'm going to be your host on this adventure of learning.